Wow. Chilly. I hope you enjoyed watching my hike of Circle All Peak in the Wasatch Cache National Forest in Utah. I did that hike a few weeks ago. It's been a little bit challenging with winter mountain recreation this year for us. Here in Utah, we have been dealing with considerable avalanche danger, and so that's something that I wanted to talk about at the end of this video and kind of go through with you my process of making assessments of conditions for winter mountains. First of all, there are some special things to consider when recreating in the winter mountains. There are challenges that you don't necessarily have during the summer, such as in not all cases will trails any longer exist. They'll be buried in snow, you don't always really know what's underneath the snow, which can present its own set of dangers. Weather is going to be a more severe impact because storm systems move in and they kind of hang out longer than they would in the summertime, where thunderstorms can tend to roll through the mountains. In the winter, the storms can tend to settle in for a longer period of time. So that's something that you need to consider when looking at the forecast. Your pack weight is going to be heavier in the winter than in the summer. You're subsequent to the changes in terrain and the pack weight, the number of miles per hour that you can travel will reduce. A lot of times it's going to go down from like 2 miles an hour to 1 mile an hour, and that's a pretty significant difference. And basically, everything is harder, it takes longer, and the situation is much more dynamic in the winter time than it is in the summer. I'm going to do a video coming up soon about the gear that I bring hiking with me in the winter mountains, but for this video today, I wanted to talk about the process that I go through when I'm evaluating the conditions and making my risk assessment, deciding whether it's a good idea to go out or not. So for this particular hike that I did, it was 3.3 miles with about 1,500 feet of elevation gain. For those familiar with the Wasatch mountain range, it was out of the Big Cottonwood Canyon. It's a very popular area to recreate from what I'm gathering, although on the day that I went, I only saw one other person on the trail. He was actually out on snowshoes. I did not find that the trail conditions really warranted the use of snowshoes. It was packed down well enough from people that had previously traveled there. So I just used micro spikes, and that was perfectly adequate for my needs. Towards the end of the hike, when I was getting up to the peak, that area there had been sun exposed throughout the day, and so the snow was starting to break up and become a little bit slushy. So I did find that I had to kick in some steps to create more of a platform that I could step down into, since my micro spikes were not gaining enough purchase on the slope. So I was still kind of like sliding down even with the micro spikes on. So I just use a technique called kicking in steps, where you just kind of kick the snow to create a little platform that you can then set your foot onto safely and exchange weight back and forth as you step. So it's been a little bit of a challenge for me this year to find places that are safe to hike because of the avalanche danger. We have had considerable avalanche danger or higher throughout basically the entire winter season, and there's a lot that goes into snow science, but it pretty much is boiling down to the fact that we have something that's called a persistent weak layer. So there's a layer that's under the snowpack. It's part of the snowpack, but it's one of the base layers of this pack that is causing this condition where we're just not able to get a solid snowpack that's really very safe to travel in. Like I said, there's a lot to consider when it comes to snow science, and to be honest with you, I've probably spent about 15 hours this winter alone studying this topic with my own reading, my own research, and then attending different seminars and courses online, all of them free, which has been fantastic, but just trying to get a good grasp on all of the different elements that are included in when you're trying to make an assessment of avalanche danger, and just really understanding what goes into that. Fortunately, we don't really all need to be experts on snow science in order to make good decisions in the winter mountains. There's a lot of information that's just boiled down right at our fingertips online that we can take a look at and use that information combined with a pretty short list of skills in order to make good decisions. And it's really important that we are armed with the information to make good decisions, because 90% of avalanches are actually triggered by the person that swept or someone in their party. So the human factor is a huge component when it weighs into the conditions on whether or not an avalanche is going to occur. If this is all new to you and you're just like, where do I even start with this? knowbeforeyougo.org is a great resource. They actually have a free 1-hour online course that'll run you through some basic information and kind of teach you what it is that you need to know before you go. I'm going to talk with you a little bit about my process. So I've definitely gone through and checked out the Know Before You Go in previous years. Their 5 things that they suggest is get the gear, get the training, get the forecast, get the picture, and get out of harm's way. So once you have a good assessment of that, then you're able to take the next step in making the decisions that you need to make. A website that I find very useful and I have bookmarked is avalanche.org. Going to that website, I can get a look at the mountain ranges throughout the western United States. And right there on the home page, I'm going to get a really good picture of what the avalanche condition rating is generally for the mountain range that I'm looking to visit. I can click through and drill down onto that mountain range and get a more detailed description of what that rating means. And then I actually drill down even further into the forecast, and it's going to pinpoint exactly what the dangers are. So what slopes will be more dangerous, at what elevation there is more increased risk of avalanche, and specifically what it is that I should be looking to avoid in order to mitigate the danger. From there, if I determine that it is potentially safe for me to travel into that mountain range, I'm going to take my route that I have in mind. I'm going to go to caltopo.com and utilize their map overlay layers of avalanche and slope angle shading. When I'm looking at slope angle shading, I'm most specifically interested in the 35 degree to 45 degree shading. It's going to be the red shading, and that's going to tell me where the most significant avalanche dangers could be along my route. The reason for that is because avalanches are most likely to happen in terrain that is between 38 degrees and 40 degrees, just because it's not really steep enough to slough off any snow layers in and of itself, but it is more prone to be triggered towards an avalanche because it is steep enough for that. It's kind of the layman's discussion of a much more complex issue. But I'm going to take a look at that and see how much of my area is traveling through avalanche terrain and combine that information with the information I've attained from avalanche.org and make a risk assessment about whether or not I think it's a good idea to go. Unfortunately, a lot of times this year, some of the places I've looked at have been no-go across the board. But at the time that I looked at this hike that you just watched, I deemed it safe enough to go. There were a couple of areas that I was like, I definitely won't linger there. But because there was already a trail cut through the terrain, I didn't feel that I was going to be the cause to trigger an avalanche that would happen above or below me and put myself or anyone else at risk. So these are decisions that you need to learn to make and feel comfortable making if traveling in the winter mountains is something that you're interested in doing. It's not just like going out in the summer with some snow on the ground. You do need to put the effort in and learn more about what's happening around you. In the description box of this video, I will link the websites that I've referred to that I use. Every time I go out into the winter mountains, I'm going to click through on those websites and study the information that is available at my fingertips and interpret it based on my skill set to decide whether or not it's a risk that I'm willing to take. Something that we all need to be doing when we're traveling in the winter mountains, and I'm not sharing this information to try to discourage anyone from getting out there. In fact, I am sharing it because I want to encourage you to learn and become a more skillful and knowledgeable outdoor recreationalist. I thank you so much for watching this. If you found this information valuable to you, please give this video a thumbs up. And if you're not already, consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. Thank you again, and I'll see you very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.